Hey everybody, Nick with Honeit. Today we have special guest Matthew Burzon. Matthew is the president, founder. He runs Source and Recruit, which is an amazing recruiting firm we work with. I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for quite a while. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, hey, we like to talk about kind of the current state of recruiting on this podcast. Obviously it's a candidate-driven market. It's a bit crazy out there. What are you seeing at Source and Recruit?
It is. So we're based in Vermont, and the challenge of recruiting in Vermont is that we have a relatively small economy compared to other states in the U.S. And because of that, our talent pools are smaller. So we're used to a challenging environment. Recruiting anywhere outside of Burlington, Vermont can be a real challenge, but it also has given us so much time to practice our technical sourcing ability and find ways to overcome that. Anytime we start branching outside of Vermont and getting into larger metro areas, I feel like the team crushes it. So, but that being said, we do have to coach our clients into moving quickly and being competitive with their offers and slightly leading the market if they want top talent, because candidates do have so many options available to them right now.
What are you seeing in terms of that interview experience? We talk a lot about how many steps does it take for a team to kind of decide this person's right and to feel comfortable and making an offer. What are you seeing at this point?
So yeah, a lot of our customers need to get used to us doing a nice thorough screen with Honeit. So that's new, and the feedback from us using the Honeit tool in our screening process has been fabulous. Customers love it. They love being able to hear the candidates talk, and it takes a lot off their plate that many of our customers aren't used to doing. So, we work for a lot of hiring managers and management, but we also have HR procuring our services a lot. And a lot of the HR professionals that we work with and the in-house recruiters that we work with have these rec loads that are incredible. They'll have 35 plus roles, like is kind of the norm. So when we take screening calls off their plate, they're very grateful for that. And I would say, to answer your question, I think once we get that first screening done, we see 1 to 2 interviews with the hiring managers, and then hopefully we're at the offer stage. And anytime we get to 3, it starts to get a little awkward for the candidates. They're having to take time off from their jobs.
Yeah, they're working, they're talking to other companies, and that's pretty good. If you can hire in, say, a recruiter phone screen and a couple of, let's say, video calls or an on-site meeting, that's a pretty efficient process. Some of our clients, we're hearing stories of 6, 7, 8 separate conversations, with different people. And we have to think about the candidate's time, but we also have to think about, how much prep and how much do these individuals you're putting in this interview process even know what the hiring manager wants, or are they the right interview team? What are they asking? Like, there's just, if you're going to allocate a 6, 7 step process, you really need to know what's happening and make that a structured and efficient process, right?
Yeah. Yes. And we try to do our homework ahead of time to understand, if our candidates are entertaining other opportunities, or, with technical sourcing, sometimes you reach out to folks that are entirely happy in their current role. They're interested in hearing what you have to say, but you've got like that short window and
yep.
They might entertain another offer, but the psychology of recruitment, right? Like, that candidate starts looking at another opportunity and they might say to themselves, wow, this is interesting. I wonder what else is out there. And we want to find our candidates the right job that brings them happiness and enjoyment, right? But we may also lose them to another role, and we don't want to lose them. So
that's true. Sometimes you hear hiring managers, you send a great candidate, but they're like, I want to see 3 more candidates just to compare or whatever. that happens frequently. I'm sure it happens on the other side. Candidates tack to, they weren't looking. They've had now a good conversation with your team and maybe the client. And now they say, well, wait a minute, before I accept just one job, maybe I do want to talk to a few companies. That's interesting.
Yes. So we'd like to move swiftly.
I love your point about, partnering with internal corporate recruiters or HR as a partner. That's a really interesting dynamic. And I started on the agency side and then went in-house. And the first thing I realized is that those internal recruiters are still responsible for who they let through, even if you source the candidate, right? So many times it's a second phone screen with, say, an internal corporate recruiter, after your team. Are you finding that goes away when you share some insights or highlights from your phone screens?
Yeah. So Honeit has been really powerful in that sense. The way we used to do it was with typed up notes. And one, it's time consuming, right? It takes a lot of time to type up notes while you're also talking and trying to screen a candidate. It's hard to multitask and do that. You got to polish it up because you want the quality of the deliverables to look acceptable for the agency brand, right? And then you send it in. And now, is the recruiter or hiring manager, are they taking the time to read a few pages of notes? Do they believe what we're saying? We're honest in what we write, but they don't necessarily have to believe it. It's so much more credible when it's coming. They can hear the candidate in their own words talking about their experiences.
How many sound bites is your team typically sharing? We hear from different clients, in terms of 8 highlights, 12 highlights, 2 highlights. What do you found is that kind of perfect amount that kind of gives the hiring manager what they need and is easy for your team to share? Such
a great question. So when we first used Honeit, we were thinking we would take the 4 best responses and keep it short and sweet. Just following copywriting best practices, right? Be succinct, don't overly complicate it. We then shifted our thought process and are now including probably around 10 or 12 and figured might as well be transparent. And then our the recruiting team is usually saying hey, check out in particular, question 1, 3, 5, and 7. Those I think are guiding the hiring manager to those key answers. Interesting. Yes. Yeah. So it's interesting. And the way the hiring managers are reacting is also interesting. Some are listening to all of the recordings of the questions. They're sitting through a 30-minute phone screen and they love it. And then the feedback to us is, this is great. I want to move forward. I really thought that what this candidate had to say here was of particular interest. Others will hone in on the questions they care most about and move forward. But it really does establish trust. And I think, I've been thinking about Honeit, and I think if you're an agency recruiting on a fee basis, Honeit enhances your profitability. You're reducing your labor hours that you're putting into your project. And if the placement is on a fee basis, you're more profitable. So I think that's huge. But even if you're not, if you're just recruiting straight hourly or you're in-house wanting to use this tool, it saves time. And if it saves time, you can get more done with your limited work week. So it's pretty fabulous.
Thank you, man. Are you working with, say, the hiring manager when you kick off a search or partner with a new client? Are you kind of getting some interview questions from them? Have you started asking them to help you create your call guides and things like that?
Yeah. So the way that we have kind of a standard intake meeting.
Perfect.
And that's been developed over many years and going through Sourcecon Academy training and seeing what other professionals in the industry are doing. And it's kind of we've pulled from all these different places to have our version of the intake meeting. So that's built into Honeit, and we conduct that kickoff call. And from there, we'll take that and the job description and sort of compile the list of questions that we feel we need to have an effective screen and make sure that the candidates we're presenting to the hiring team are of quality.
Fantastic. That's so great to hear you're using Honeit for the intake call. We find, that's probably one of the most important conversations a recruiter would have, right? It's that intake or kickoff call to and essentially it's an interview. You're interviewing the hiring manager about why the job's open, what's interesting about the job, the pitch, right? How do you sell it to the candidate? What are the key skills? And again, we're going beyond some job description that may have just been cut and paste for the last 5 years, right?
Yeah. Well, and the highlighting, what is it? The job highlight feature. I think that's what it's called, where you can turn that intake meeting into a meet the hiring manager tool with its own dedicated landing page. So not all of our hiring managers, I would say, pitch their roles with equal skill and
Fair
finesse.
Yep.
We have some hiring managers that are just terrific salespeople, and they'll pitch the job better than anyone. And we can capture that with Honeit. And in some cases, we're using that feature.
That's fantastic.
We have other hiring managers that they need they need help or could use some support. That's why they hire us. And in that case, it might not be appropriate to use that feature, or they don't want us to use that feature. But it's really nice to have that as an option.
Even for the team, though, just to kind of make sure everybody on the team is on the same page with what the hiring manager wants and things like, even if they weren't able to attend that intake session or listen in during the call, you've got a record of that for future. But tell me a little bit how Source and Recruit, the firm, kind of divvies up responsibilities. Do you have kind of dedicated sourcers and then dedicated recruiters or account managers? Talk to me about your structure.
Sure. So I think we may be a bit unique. We run a 360 desk.
Okay.
So our recruiters are doing sourcing, presenting candidates, and also if utilization drops or in between projects, they're doing sales. And when we hire Source and Recruit, we use a tool. We use PXT Select, which is a Wiley product. And I look for like a certain profile of behaviors and interests that fits our role. And so you're kind of a sales oriented recruiter, and that's our DNA. And then all of our systems, our ATS system, we're using Loxo. We love it. Loxo does a really nice job of kind of bouncing back and forth between an ATS and a CRM. So like we use all of the systems built into Loxo, and it kind of lets us bounce back and forth between recruitment activities and sales activities seamlessly. So that's our setup. And it's challenging. There are some incredible technical sourcers out there that really don't like sales. They just want to source. And that right now is like a little outside of like how we operate. So I wouldn't say that we won't shift to like 180 and split up, like sourcing and recruiting. I think as we continue to grow, we may experiment with that and see, it's all about the volume, right? If someone just wants to source, we have to have enough volume of recs to justify that one role and split up duties. And so we're not looking at the world that way right now, and it works. And I think it does keep the work interesting for the right person.
What about on the sales side, when maybe you filled your current rec load, now you're looking for prospecting new clients or new roles to work on? What have you found to be successful kind of in that approach? Is it word of mouth? Do you do marketing of your firm? Kind of how do you get the word out?
It's interesting. When we first started, it was a whole lot of cold calling, and we had to get the word out somehow, and we didn't have budgets to really market effectively. So like we just put in the sweat equity. And I think, we're in our 6th year. So, and I primarily, I do a lot of sales for our firm, and the beauty about sales is after year 3, you kind of have your network of clients that keep you going. And so it's gotten easier for me, and we have a lot of repeat business, and word of mouth. Starting in Vermont, Vermont's a relatively small state. One thing I love about living here is like if you want to talk to the governor, you pick up the phone and call the governor. Like it's an interesting place to live. I think other markets are quite a bit different from that. So we're doing a little bit more marketing now, mailers, but really I think word of mouth and helping our customers succeed and helping them grow turns into more business.
Good track record. Yeah. Good placements. I mean, yeah. And you're right. Like that's one of the cool things about recruiting is you do well with one rec, that company is likely going to continue hiring. So you just keep those relationships going. Have you found, do you ever do any kind of MPC, most placeable candidates? Like, let's say you hired, you got the placement, but maybe you had 2 or 3 candidates you submitted who were all fantastic. What do you do with candidates number 2 or the runner-ups? Are you able to market them?
We do. Yeah. It's a best practice. And our effectiveness with that often is tied into like, what does our utilization look like? So if we're going through a peak in activity where we've got a backlog of work, and as soon as we fill one rec, we're off to the next, and that recruiter has like no free time, it's a little harder to execute that. But generally speaking, we do try to market our silver medalists or semifinalists, if you will. And that's a powerful way to get in front of hiring managers.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this person's active. We screened them. They're available. Like, boom. Yeah. Proactive placements.
I'd also say, I think contingency's relatively easy to sell because the risk is so low up front for the clients. We do a lot of like contract recruiting, which is essentially like hourly work, right? So the hourly work can be a little more challenging to sell because your clients do have to spend money up front. The benefit for them is the cost per hire is usually half of like what you'd see on contingent or retained search. So there's a benefit for them, but they still have to be comfortable with that risk.
Is that kind of RPO where they give you access to their systems? They give you email addresses, to look and feel like an internal corporate recruiter?
You can take it to that level.
Okay.
Most of the time we use our systems and our emails, but you can take it to that level. Absolutely. Okay. If that's what they want. Yeah, I would OnDemand RPO. I guess you could call it OnDemand.
We should talk about, we could activate a new module we've created in Honeit, actually, it's an RPO module that lets you have sub accounts for your clients, and you could brand a candidate preview or a job preview with their logos and things like that. If maybe to stand out.
Yeah, I love it.
You'd like to try. Yeah.
White label. We historically have tried white labeling everything, and it gets a little more complicated as we're learning. Like programmatic is really hot for us right now.
Okay.
So we started, offering technical sourcing services, and that's needed, but it's not needed on every role. And programmatic is really strengthening like our on-demand RPO service, because now you're applying, especially by focusing in on like small and mid-market companies that normally wouldn't have access to programmatic. We can bring it to them because we're aggregating demand across a smaller subset of clients that normally wouldn't qualify. So it's been, tying it back to white labeling though, it's tricky. It's tricky to work with a programmatic advertiser while maintaining white labeling for a whole bunch of clients. It's like almost.
But if you have 6 marketing roles, let's say, you could invest in a little spend to say, hey, marketing coordinator in Vermont, and you then sift through and figure out kind of who to put where.
Yes. Well, for screenings, it would be amazing, because if you could white label your screenings for your select clients and they log into the call and they see the logo of your client, like it's so nice to be on brand for your customers and help them build their talent brand. But yeah, I love white labeling. I think that's the way to go.
Well, we could talk more about that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, but it does get tricky. The tech stack sometimes like throws some limitations at you, and then you have to figure out how do we work around the limitations of like each component of our tech stack while still delivering that like on brand customer experience.
It's true. Well, excellent. Well, I mean, what else can we talk about? I know, things it's kind of a candidate driven market that we're seeing with most clients. We talked a little bit about the importance of time to hire and speed and efficiency when it comes to interviewing. What are you like, besides programmatic, which I think is fascinating, tapping into the innovation in advertising, how else are you kind of getting the attention of candidates today who do have options to say, yeah, let's talk to Matt and team?
Yeah. So, programmatic is all about ad exposure, right? And I think it's doing it better, faster, and cheaper than anything that we can do manually. Then you fall into technical sourcing, and I think it's all about like quickly marketing opportunities to passive talent. And
what's your stack look like on the sourcing side of things? I mean, you mentioned Loxo, as your kind of primary ATS and CRM. Are you using tools on the front end to find emails and contact people, or do outbound?
We have some. So I really. I was a little disenchanted with like the continually increasing subscription fees from like LinkedIn and Seekout and the other players, and I really love my recruiting team to understand like what's behind all the tech, and learning Boolean language is like it's key. So definite shout out to Sourcecon Academy, which has made teaching Boolean to recruiters in a virtual environment very easy to do. Love that platform. And our team walks away with like a pretty solid understanding of like what constitutes a Boolean search string, and how do you hone in on that to like search a Google or a DuckDuckGo or a Yahoo or a Bing to find talent outside of a software subscription from LinkedIn.
Isn't it amazing? You can actually search LinkedIn outside of LinkedIn, right? And it's amazing. Yeah.
And if you can execute that well, and if you can execute the training component well, it can really improve your bottom line significantly because you're a little less dependent on subscriptions. Now, I still think LinkedIn, there's a place for them. And if you're an in-house recruiter and you have no time to source talent, like it's a great tool. And I think it's awesome. I think I really like though that our team is capable of writing Boolean search strings. And
I love Sourcecon as well. I mean, I think they did so much for the industry and crafting kind of sourcing as its own unique profession and skill set. I remember going to Sourcecons in New York, and the Grandmaster, the sourcing challenges and such. Those were so fun to even. I would try them. I'd never win them, but like
it's very hard to win
deep,
them. Yeah.
Really deep. In terms of what you can do to uncover hidden resumes and such. But and I think the cool thing with Boolean is that you have complete control of it, right? I think the other thing that's missing when you use tools is you don't really know what the algorithm is behind the scenes, and they're making assumptions here and there, and then you don't know what you don't know, right? Versus Boolean, if you craft a great OR statement, you're capturing all of your options, and you're not leaving anything to that the tool might assume or not take the edge cases into consideration. So I like that control.
Exactly. It's a high level of control, and it is a little more time consuming, but as your skill set evolves, like there are ways to speed things up. And in terms of the outreach and like getting candidates on the hook, it's you got to personalize it. I like Sourcecon talks about that in their training all the time, but I've been recruiting for 10 years, and I'm guilty of early on shotgun blasting emails out and not personalizing. And I can tell you in my career, like the best response rates happen when you take the time to slow down, personalize the outreach email a little bit. Don't give everything away right away.
That's a good point.
Withhold a little bit of information so that you pique some interest, and the candidate's inclined to say, hey, like, tell me more. Like, this is interesting.
That's an interesting point. If you include the job description and everything, and let them know the client and all that stuff, they might just investigate on their own and not contact you or find something they don't like versus, your consultative pitch or approach when you get them on the phone. That's a great point.
Yeah. And then you at least have a chance to have a dialogue and establish some rapport and figure out like what the motivation is. Like, what would make a job change worth considering? I think if you assume what that is, I think you're going to be off the mark. You're not going to be connecting.
Full circle back to trust and rapport and transparency and creating a real human relationship, with that person, because maybe that role isn't it, but you've now understand their desires and what they really want and things like that. And you capture that information somehow, hopefully in Honeit, but and then you retrieve it when you have that new role and they come up in a search result in Loxo or Honeit, and you say, oh my gosh, that person wanted to work in ed tech. You know what I mean? So part of it's having those conversations. And I think part of it's just, how do we as good recruiters capture the motivations and the things that aren't on the resume, right? Because that's where you make placements, is getting to know the person beyond the resume and getting to know the job or the rec beyond the job description and things like that.
Yeah. And if you do a good job with all of those things, things come full circle. It's like a year later, all of a sudden this opportunity drops in your lap and you say, hey, I talked to that one candidate who needed X, Y, and Z, and this is it. And all of a sudden it's like, boom.
And then they become a hiring manager, and then they give you recs, and then the circle continues, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, Matt, I know you said you had a hard stop, so I'll let you go, but thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I think it's so interesting to kind of hear the inner workings of recruiting firms today. And I know your team is a really innovative bunch. So thank you for sharing with the rest of us, and let us know if you need anything.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate it. It's been fun, and Honeit rocks. Love it. Thanks for introducing us.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Talk soon.